Let me share with you 5 businesses that I would never get involved in and why. Business number 1, anything to do with food. And there's a couple of really obvious reasons why. Food is perishable. If you don't sell it, you throw it away. Food has all sorts of regulations and standards about how it has to be packaged and stored and transported and produced. And it's a really difficult business. Unless you're extremely experienced with this, I'd be really careful getting involved with anything like this, especially if you're an early stage new entrepreneur and you're already trying to figure out all the other stuff to do with business. The other thing with food is it historically has low margins. Normally food, other than a few key categories like confectionery, is normally pretty low margin stuff. So for most people who are very passionate about healthy food and food that is real and organic and all of that sort of stuff, unfortunately, it doesn't make great business sense. It has very low margin, and I hate to say that, but it is true. Unless you are really passionate and really experienced, I'd be staying away from that sort of stuff purely from a business angle. Now, of course, you're going to find plenty of examples of entrepreneurs who made their money with food or drinks or something like that. And great, there's always exceptions to the rule, but I'm just talking about in general terms. If you're not experienced in something, you don't have a big piggy bank to leverage, this is one place that you could find yourself in hot water really fast. The next one is fixed location businesses that only support a local geographical market. So things like restaurants, hotels, nail salons, hair salons, all of those sorts of businesses, those are tricky businesses, and they're tricky for a number of reasons. Number one, there's the setup cost of the location. Realistically, you're going to be probably spending hundreds of thousands of pounds to set up a fixed location. If it's a restaurant or a hair salon, right, it's not a cheap business to get started. You're going to have to fit out an actual space. So you're going to be spending months and a lot of money setting up the business before you can even trade. The next thing is that the business grows and grows and grows, and it just starts to become successful and it just starts to be profitable. And then if you want to grow it or expand it, you're going to have to open another location. So let's say it cost you 100,000 to set up location number 1, and then finally you get 100,000 worth of profit in the bank. Now you're going to take that money and you're going to go and put it into another location. And now you're running 2 locations. And now you're running 3 locations. And every time you've had some spare available cash, you've put them into new locations. And just when you thought you were ahead of the game, now you've got so many locations that you need an area manager. And the area manager costs a lot of money. And now all of that money goes into hiring and keeping an area manager. So it's a really tricky business. It's one of those businesses that very rarely hits a lift-off moment, or very rarely hits escape velocity where you start printing money and it can just keep going and going and going. It's normally a business that has these natural ceilings that you hit the ceiling and you have to invest in new locations. So it's a difficult business, it's very capital intensive, and often the upside opportunity versus the downside risk doesn't really stack up. So this leads nicely into number 3. You get the idea of high capital intensive businesses, so high capex. Capex is like you have to spend a lot of money to set up or to expand. Now here's the thing. Businesses have a lift-off moment where the business is in business and it washes its face, it makes enough money to stay in business. But what we really get into business for is what's called the lift-off moment, or the escape velocity moment, where the business just goes up and up and up and it starts making a lot of profit and it just keeps growing and growing and growing. So businesses that have high capex, you almost never get that moment because you're just constantly reinvesting into the business. So this is anything with like a lot of physical stock. It's anything that has huge amounts of R&D that is baked into it. It's anything that has a massive amount of hiring and offices and all of those sorts of things where you've got a lot of people involved. And it's anything that requires a lot of cutting edge technology in order to develop or grow or expand or to set up. So these high capex businesses are for people who are extremely experienced, and they probably have private equity backing, and they've really done a lot of financial forecasting and modeling in order to know that this is a good idea for them. But for everyone else, it's probably a bad idea. So the next one is things that are highly regulated. So if there's a rule book that you have to follow, it means that it's very hard to differentiate. If everyone has to follow that rule book, then everyone kind of has to behave the same way. There are very few ways that you can differentiate that business. Yes, you can hire slightly more friendly staff, but how are you going to get them when your competitor's not going to get them? Maybe you can do something with the brand or the branding or the marketing campaigns, but ultimately that stuff can be copied when everything else is pretty much the same as well. So things like medical businesses that have to operate a certain way, airplanes or safety related businesses or theme parks or any of that sort of stuff, it's all highly regulated. And ultimately everyone has to play by the same rule book, and it's very hard to differentiate those businesses. So for me personally, I'd be staying away from those. And then the final one I want to mention is really sexy businesses, or businesses that sound super fun, super exciting, and that people would want to enter those businesses just for the fun of it. So for example, yoga studios, Pilates studios, nightclubs, entertainment businesses, businesses that have something to do with fun and fashion and photography and blah, blah, blah. And like, it's all like living the dream kind of businesses. These businesses attract so many people who can afford to lose money. In many cases, they're from wealthy families, or their reason for doing it is not about being profitable. They can afford to lose money. They're just doing it for the fun of it. They're doing it because it's a cool thing to say that you do. And these businesses notoriously don't make money because they're so saturated with people who are not in it for the money. There's a great old saying, which is where there's muck, there's money, which would be the opposite of a sexy business. So I know people who make millions from like waste removal and scaffolding and those kind of businesses, because those businesses are not sexy and they're not like a cool business to say that you do on Instagram. So therefore, the only people who get into them are people who have stood the test of time, they know how that business operates, and they know that they're going to run that business profitably. So I would try and stay away from the super sexy stuff. What you're better off doing is making a ton of money and spending it on doing fun, exciting, sexy things. As a general rule, here's what I do like. I like anything that relates to intellectual property, media, software, or data. All of those businesses tend to scale really well. They get liftoff, then they hit escape velocity, they print money, and then they get sold, they become valuable. They're really, really cool businesses for the times that we're in. These are businesses that are not limited by geography. They're businesses that can naturally scale. You can build proprietary, unique assets in this space. And if you do this well, you could actually have a really great exit on your hands as well. If you can take your passion, your origin story, your mission, and your vision and combine it with data, intellectual property, media, and software, you are probably onto a much better chance of having a winner, maybe. Let me know, do you agree with this? Do you disagree? Do you have some examples you want to share? Is there a business idea you want me to comment on next? Let me know in the comments below. And if you've enjoyed this video, click like and subscribe so that it tells the algorithm to show it to more entrepreneurs.